Hi, this is Jim Lobaito, and I'm president and founder of a company called Performance Group. You're listening to the podcast version of a program that originally aired on the BizTalk Radio Show. I started BizTalk so you'd have access to today's leading experts about growing your company and yourself. BizTalk is produced by Performance Group. At Performance Group, we work at the front end of a company's revenue stream. We find the salespeople who generate the revenue, and we provide onboarding programs that get them doing that sooner. Our passion is aligning talent with opportunity. That's why we're known as a Salesforce development company. Enjoy the program. On our program today is Erika Andersen. She is a nationally known leadership coach and founder of Podius International, a consulting, coaching, and training firm that focuses on leader readiness. Author, consultant, sought-after keynote speaker, her firm works with CEOs and top executives of many major corporations, like PepsiCo, NBC, Time Warner Cable, and others. In addition to her books, you can also read her blogs on Forbes.com. Today, we're discussing her book, Growing Great Employees, Turning Ordinary People into Extraordinary Performers. Erika, welcome back to BizTalk.
Thanks. It's wonderful to be here.
I don't often read directly from a book, but this is probably one of the best introductions I read in some time, so I'm going to share this with the audience. I think it sets the stage on what we're going to talk about today. In the introduction of your book, Growing Great Employees, you write, "Here's a little experiment. Find any 10 people who have some responsibility for others, work success, managers, HR staff, team leaders. One at a time, ask them what is the hardest and most challenging part of their job. Tell them they can say whatever they want. They don't have to be politically correct, and no one is writing down their answers. I'll bet you anything that 9 out of 10 will say something about dealing with the people stuff." Erika, well said. Well, I've
conducted versions of that experiment for the last 25 years.
Well, and I wanted to read that for the audience because I would challenge people to actually, in the next managers meeting, to facilitate a discussion around that and then maybe get into what and why it's being caused, or they would write that down there. Because when I applied for, really my second sales leadership role, I got the job, right? And so I'm with my future boss, and we're talking about the fact of why he chose me and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll never forget this. He said, looked at me, he says, Jim, he says, you're going to find that the job is real easy. It's the people that are going to drive you nuts.
Yeah. So, and what's even weirder about this is, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but just for purposes of conversation, So I think it is kind of universally agreed that the most difficult part of any job is how do you deal well with the people? How do you motivate them? How do you clarify for them what the job is? How do you get them headed in the right direction? How do you develop them? And yet it's the part of the job that we get, generally speaking, the least preparation for. I mean, this is just crazy to me. If you really stop and think about it, if somebody is going to be a salesperson, generally, they get sales training. I mean, people are pretty good about giving people sales training because they understand that selling is a difficult thing and we have to train you how to do it. So they get some training in consultative sales and in time management and even things like technical things like doing a call sheet. But quite often, when people get elevated into sales management, the way it works is you walk into your boss's office and he or she says, "Here, manage these 5 people. Good luck. It's going to be really tough. Let me know if you have a problem." This thing that is universally understood to be a complex and challenging thing, many, if not most, managers get almost no training to do it well.
But amen. Because it just brought back memories because, man, I'm talking over 3 decades ago that I was given that position. So, and I remember taking that role, obviously being a competent salesperson, competent enough that they promote you to management, and which is not always the best criteria, by the way. But I can remember sitting at that desk after the first week. But I remember being so overwhelmed. I thought I was busy as a salesperson, but I feel like I was falling into this black hole. I was totally unprepared for driving revenue, which is what a sales manager is supposed to do, versus my role as a salesperson, which was to generate revenue. I don't know if it's by dumb luck or putting my head down or tenacity or combination of all 3 of those. I just figured it out over time. So So here's the million-dollar question. Erika, what is the underlying theme behind this? Why, after 3 decades, are we still talking about, as leaders, we're not ready to lead people?
It's a great question, and I've thought about this a lot over the years. I think that we believe that when it comes to tasks or jobs that require interacting with other people, we still have this leftover thing that it's quote-unquote soft. And so it's not as important, and you should just somehow magically know how to do it. Like we think we should all magically know how to parent, right? And we have to figure that out with some difficulty over the first 15 years of our kids' lives. It's really a goofy assumption, and the other thing that underlies it is we still don't believe that that you can teach people to manage the same way you can teach them to sell or play tennis or cook a souffle, and you can. I mean, that's one of the things that I think makes Proteus, my company, unique is that we believe that both leadership and management are teachable, and that management particularly is craft-based. It's a set of skills that you can learn. And, of course, some people are better than others. It kind of exists along a bell curve. Some people are, like you say, you figured it out on your own and more successful. Well, some people try and figure it out on their own, and they're never successful because they're just not that naturally adept at it. So there are some people who start out sort of at the top of the bell curve. They're just pretty good natural managers of people, and lucky for them, then, their natural tendencies come into play, and they're pretty successful. There are other people, a lot of people, who kind of live in the lower half of the bell curve who could be pretty good managers if they got the support and the help, both in terms of mindset and skills that they needed, but they don't. And so they fail, and it's bad for the business, and it's bad for them, and it's bad for the people they manage. So the main reason, really, I wrote this book 7 or 8 years ago is I couldn't find it. I'd be coaching people, and they'd say, is there just a good, simple book that talks about how to manage people and why it's important? And at least I couldn't find one. I mean, there are a bunch of little kind of tips, tricks books. Here's 50 things to say to people, and then there's good, dense theoretical management books, Peter Drucker, that help you understand the core of management. But just kind of the Boy Scout handbook of management. How do you do it? How do you take a person? How do you figure out who to hire? How do you get it started right? How do you keep them growing? How do you, transition people either up or out when you need to? How do you do this stuff? So that's why I wrote the book, to help people understand that it is a set of skills. It's a craft. You can get better at it.
The metaphor of calling this a handbook, I believe, is accurate, Erika, because when you get your first manager's job, you should read this book, and then 2 to 3 years in your job, you had to go back and reread it again.
I totally agree with you, and we have, Proteus has managed skill training programs that use the intellectual property in this book, and one of our clients is a big manufacturing company that has taught this to thousands of managers, and kind of almost without exception, people say, oh, God, thank you. Now I got some actual tools in my toolkit. I know how to have a feedback conversation. I know how to coach people. I know how to delegate something. I know how to listen better. It's like this stuff that I need every day to be pretty good at this. We're trying to help. That's why I wrote this book. The thing that's so crazy to me about people not getting help to be good managers, it's not as though it's unimportant. We've all experienced what it's like to have good managers and bad managers. And when you have a good manager, that really supports your success. It supports the success of the business. You know what you're supposed to do. You feel helped and supported to do that. You're clear. You get good feedback about whether or not it's going well. Responsibilities get delegated to you as you are capable of doing them. It's such an incredible enhancer and catalyzer of productivity to have people be managed well. It's just bizarre to me that business doesn't put more attention toward it.
Because we all know, right? I'll make a statement. I can hear the heads nodding as I talk about this. We all know that necessarily people don't quit jobs; they quit managers.
Totally, but there's also piles and piles of research that show that.
Right, but we still let our managers manage ineffectively, which I don't quite understand. So the question I have on this, what is some of the fundamental stuff you have to get right? And I was thinking about, it has to, first of all, probably start at the top. Doesn't the CEO have to give more than lip service to, creating a culture where we're going to have the managers really effective at what they do? Doesn't it have to be a dictate that they insist upon doing that?
Yes, and they have to demonstrate it themselves. When you're the CEO, what you actually do is much more important than what you say. So to your point, giving more than lip service, a CEO who really wants to create a culture of good management, good leadership, he or she has to say the right things. He or she has to ensure that it's baked into the organization, that people are hired for, held accountable to, and rewarded or not for managing well. And he or she has to, him or herself, be a good manager, be, clear, give good direction, be fair, give good feedback, delegate, all the things that we talk about in the book. It's because people look to see, what do you say? And then they look to see, well, do you make sure that that's true in the organization? And then they look to see, are you actually doing it yourself? And if those three things line up, that's your best shot at creating the kind of culture where people are really managed well and all the benefits accrue.
Our guest is Erika Andersen. We're talking about her book, Growing Great Employees, Turning Ordinary People into Extraordinary Performers. Erika, before we get too far into this, let's take a step back, because before we even hire an employee, there's some planning we should do and some things we should get in line. So what is that pre-planning we need to have done before we even hire an employee?
Oh, again, wonderful question. When people hire, they tend to be way too superficial in what they're looking for. They look for technical skills. Does this person, and markers of what they think are going to be success. So some people look at, where did this person graduate from? Where did this person go to college? Some people look at, has this person had the, particular job experience I need them to have? But there's an interesting statistic that I just read about a year ago and incorporated into a post I read at Forbes, that when fairly senior people, management and executive level people are hired and they fail at their jobs in the first year, 87% of the time it's because of poor cultural fit, which means not that they didn't have the right skills or experience or pedigree or, degree for the job. It means they weren't the right kind of person for that organization. So that's one of the things you have to really think about. You have to think about, okay, what kind of a team am I trying to create? What kind of an organization is this that I'm a part of, if I'm part of a larger organization? And what's the DNA? What's the kind of behavioral DNA of that organization? Like, for instance, there's an example I use in the book. Let's say you have a company that invents kids' toys. You're probably going to want people who are all the way from, entry level to the CEO, people who are playful, people who are creative, people who are team oriented, the things that you collaborative, people who would be, the sorts of people who would be good in a company that invented kids' toys. Let's say, on the other hand, that you are the CEO of a company that makes life-saving medical devices. You're going to want people who are rigorous, who are organized, who have a very high bar of quality. It's going to be a different kind of organizational DNA. And if you don't look for that kind of stuff as well as for the skill sets, you're likely to hire somebody who might have, on paper, the right skills, but who will be a terrible fit for your organization. So you really have to think through that before you hire people. And then you have to interview to that, too, which is a whole other thing. We could talk about that. People interview badly, and you don't have to. You can interview well to find out if this really is a person who's going to be able to do well in your organization.
Yeah, that's a whole other hour program, definitely on how to interview, right? Yeah. Well, and
also, let me say, too, because it's such a big deal, and this may be helpful to your listeners, let's say two things about interviewing. One thing one, people who interview talk way too much. If when you're interviewing somebody for a job, you should be talking no more than about 25% of the time, because you're not trying to talk them into coming, you're trying to find out who they are, right? So that's thing one. Thing two is people in interviews almost always ask questions to which there are obvious right answers. Here's what I mean. So people will say in an interview, for instance, we really like self-starters. Are you a self-starter? And then, unless you're either brain dead or don't want the job, you're going to say, yes, I'm a self-starter. So we talk about behavioral interviewing. We talk about I offer in the book a very simple way to not ask those right answer questions, to instead kind of set up scenarios and then let the person just answer from their own experience. For instance, I'll give you a very funny example that's actually true. 15 years ago when I was hiring an assistant for, my business was just starting to grow and I was hiring an assistant. And at the time it was just me and one other consultant and his assistant, and we were both on the road all the time. So the way I set it up, rather than saying, hey, you're going to have to spend a lot of time by yourself, is that okay? And all of my candidates would have said yes. What I said was, okay, so I and this other consultant, we're on the road most of the time, and you're going to be in the office by yourself a lot. How would you deal with that? Not is that okay, or would you be good with that, or, but just how would you deal with that? And it was so fascinating. The first person said that wouldn't be a problem. She said this. That wouldn't be a problem for me. I have a lot of friends in the area. Okay, no, The second person got very twitchy and worried and said, oh, but I'd be able to get a hold of you any time, right? And I'd always have your phone number. And the third person who I ended up hiring, and was my assistant for 13 years, thought about it for a minute, and she said, well, I don't have really high social needs, so I think that would be okay. And as long as we had a pretty good way to stay in touch and, I could kind of give you a download at the end of the day, I think that'd be fine. And if I'd asked the normal, are you okay with that question, I wouldn't have gotten any of that differentiation.
And in your book, you create a framework to get people in the mindset of being able to ask the right questions when interviewing.
Yeah.
I always tell people you get 100% of the answers back to the questions you ask. And if you're not getting the right answers, you're asking the wrong questions.
Oh, that's great. That's exactly right.
When you watch professionals interview, like Barbara Walters, I'll never forget the comment she made one time when someone said, well, you seem so natural and relaxed when you're doing these interviews. And she said, well, I write 200 questions before I go into doing an interview. So she's totally prepared.
And it's not only true of interviewing, it's true of most things that you do with employees. There's way too much winging it. I mean, people go in interviews and they haven't thought at all about the questions they want to ask, and so they end up talking a lot and defaulting to these sort of obvious right answer questions. But it's true in everything else, too. It's later on in the book, we have a model for delegation. And delegating is, it's not just assigning tasks, it's transferring an area of responsibility to somebody. And so many managers just kind of wander into that. Hey, why don't you start taking care of, the Olympics? Okay, good. Okay, I'll see you later, rather than giving it the time and preparation up front that it deserves to make sure that the person understands what you're asking of them, they understand what kind of oversight you're going to offer, how that gradual transfer is going to take place so that they're successful. There's way too much winging it with managers when they're doing important things for their employees. And you can't just wander into things. You have to prepare for important conversations, at least to some extent.
Thank you for that, because the question was, what is foundational? Because I went through the book and I got towards the end and I said, great book, Erika, but none of it matters if you've hired the wrong person, right? We got to start with the right person.
Exactly.
Let's talk about onboarding new employees. When we're onboarding our people, you write that there's really 3 good questions that we need to answer. Who do I need to know? How do things get done around here? And what's expected of me? And I thought, again, this is so basic, but if we went and asked a bunch of employees today, we lined up 100 people and asked them those 3 questions, especially in the first 30 days of the job, I bet they couldn't answer it.
Exactly. And it's really anxiety-producing, and they're so easy to answer well. What we found is this is just a human need. If you're moving to a new town or going to a new school or starting a new club or beginning a new job or starting a new relationship, that's what you want to know. Who do I need to know? How does stuff get done? What's expected of me? And if you can answer those questions well and simply for somebody in the first 30 days, it's amazing how much steeper then the learning curve can become. People can get up to speed so much more quickly if they know those basic things.
Erika, when you work with your clients, how do you get them ready for this part of the onboarding of setting up what are the expectations of the employee, who do they need to know, and what do they need to get done? How do you do that for your clients?
Well, there's, you can do it in a variety of ways. When I wrote the book, I really tried to give as much help and support in the book as possible. So at the end of that chapter, there's a kind of template onboarding, here's what you can do in the first day, the first couple of days, the first week to help people with these 3 simple things. And so I actually included a template in the book that a lot of clients have subsequently used. And I say to clients here, let's take this template and start here. And it's just a matter of those three things, of connecting people with the people that they need to know who are important to their job success, making sure they have good, strong relationships with those people early on, helping them understand the explicit and implicit, the explicit, like the actual processes and systems they have to use to get things done, literally how things get done, but also helping them understand the less obvious kind of cultural expectations in the company. Oh, we never do this. We always do that. I mean, and a lot of it, and then the third thing is, if you have a good job description and you have and I talk a lot about job descriptions, most job descriptions are pretty awful, but if you create a good one that's really, really focuses on the core responsibilities that person has, then that's a great way to communicate to them what's expected of them. But back to the how do things get done around here, if you've worked in a place for quite a while, there's all kinds of kind of subterranean understanding you have about the way stuff gets done and what's cool to do and what's not cool to do, all the way from how do you dress, how do you talk, how much can you kind of talk back to, the powers that be, all that kind of stuff. And if you can bring that to your conscious awareness and share it with new employees, oh my gosh, it just makes their life so much easier. They tend not to make cultural mistakes, and they just can get up and running so much more quickly. So to the extent that you can share with people, here, this is the kind of organization this is, these are the expectations that we have of people, this is how people operate together, it's so incredibly helpful.
Our guest is Erika Andersen. In addition to Erika Andersen sharing her expertise in how to lead and develop great employees, you can find other experts that have shared their wisdom with us here on BizTalk. Those are available as podcasts on our website and cover business topics in the areas of recruiting, leadership, marketing, performance management, sales management, and personal development. You can download these podcasts from our website. BizTalkRadioShow.com. That's B-I-Z, talkradioshow.com. Erika, in your book you state, making clear agreements includes clarifying, commitment, and support. Talk to our audience about those three things.
This goes to what's expected of me. Lots of times employees are just not clear what's expected of them. They don't have good job descriptions, then they don't have a good conversation with their managers. The manager kind of does a look at a promise about what the job is, and then the person is just left kind of on their own trying to desperately figure it out by themselves. And if you, like for instance, let's say that you are a sales manager, and you want the person to be clear on what the expectation is about how let's say you're going to give them a client. They're a new person. You're taking, somebody's overloaded, so you're making them the account manager. I'm just, making this up. You're making them the account manager of a new client. It's so important to sit down with them and clarify, first of all, why it's important, how it works, really what success looks like, what's a clear and kind of compelling picture of what success will look like for them managing this client. And then to get there, to make it a two-way conversation, to say, okay, what questions do you have? What concerns do you have? Do you see any obstacles? What else do you need to know? To make sure they're really clear. And then the commitment stage is you kind of write it down. And it's great if you get them to do it. So just to make sure we're on the same page, can you write down for me your understanding of what it's going to mean for you to manage this client? Okay, boom, 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 boom. And then what kind of support do you need from me in order to do this? What do I expect of you? What do you expect from me? And then the support phase is you actually give the support that you've set. Like, for instance, if they say, well, one of the things that I'm really going to need is to understand a little bit about the history of this client. And you say, okay, well, Joe, who has been managing them for the last 3 years, I'll get him to sit down with you sometime over the next week or two and really just give you a deep dive on what's happened with this client over the last 3 or 4 years. And we have some documentation, but mostly you're going to get it from the horse's mouth. Then you got to do that. That's your responsibility then as the manager. If you've clarified and committed and then you don't do the support you said you're going to do, that kind of throws it all into suspicion land. So you have to make it really clear what the agreement is, why it's important, how it's going to work, and then write it down. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. And then do what you said you're going to do. And if you do that, it really makes a huge difference. And it's not a huge amount of time. I mean, that initial conversation takes for a big responsibility, that you're making an agreement about, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and then maybe it's a couple of hours of your time over the next few weeks to support it. Those are investment hours. You get that time back times 10 if you do it well.
So, Erika, one other thing I want to talk about in your book here you bring up, explain the differentiation between managing somebody and coaching somebody.
You are asking really good questions. So we use coaching to mean something very specific. So managing somebody, I would say, covers everything I'm talking about in this book, from soup to nuts. So managing somebody is supporting them to success through their life cycle with you, like thinking about who are you going to bring on, bringing them on well, getting them started well, listening to them, making clear agreements, giving them feedback, delegating to them, and then coaching them. And coaching we mean very specifically to mean helping someone improve, helping them get better in a certain area. So let's say, again, that you have a salesperson and, they're good at a lot of things, but one thing that they're not good at is, let's just say, organizing their time. They're great with the prospects and clients, and they have really good people skills, and they're enthusiastic about the product, and they know how to talk about it in a way, and they're good consultative salespeople, all that kind of stuff. But they're just not well organized, and they have to be, especially as their book of business builds up. So coaching that person would mean sitting down with them, saying kind of, this is an area where you need to improve. Are you open to improving? And then having a coaching conversation with them where you figure out how they're going to improve. Is it you teaching it to them? Is it them taking a course? Is it them being mentored by maybe a peer who's very good at it? Is it them figuring out some system? You help them figure out how to improve in a particular area. And then, as with an agreement, you support it. You keep in touch with them. You set some benchmarks and timelines. You support them through that process to make sure that they know that you mean it, and so that you can track progress and improvement. So we use coaching to mean helping a person improve in a particular area of their performance.
I think coaching is a learned skill. I know I definitely had to learn it. And I can imagine our managers listening today, and they're saying, that's great. Everybody just automatically shows up and they start managing throughout the day or the week. What is the technique that you use to get in that coaching mindset, to throw the switch from, okay, manage, directing, and leading this person, throw the switch, I need to be coaching them right now? How do we do that?
Oh, I love that question. So I'm sure you noticed in the book, we talk about the coach's mindset. And the mindset that is most helpful when you're trying to coach someone to improve is to believe in their potential and to want to help them succeed. So you have to kind of investigate your own mindset. If you don't believe in someone's potential to do what you're trying to help them get better at doing, you're not going to be able to help them. It's that simple. If you don't think they can do it, you're not going to be able to help them do it. That's just, mindset is that powerful. So you have to sort of investigate and be honest about your own belief system. If you actually don't think that the person is capable of getting better, you should free them to work for somebody else, because it's going to be a horrible experience for both of you, But if you are in that place, if you do believe in their potential, then the other half is to want to help them succeed. And again, you have to be very self-reflective and accurate in your self-awareness. And if you don't really want to help them succeed, years ago I coached this executive, and he had some people who were very good, but they really needed his help to get even better. And I said to him, so do you believe that these people are capable of getting better? Like, do you believe in their potential? And he said, yes. I said, do you want to help them succeed? And he kind of got this sour look on his face, and I said, what? And he said, well, they're grown-ups. I shouldn't have to help them succeed. They ought to be able to do it on their own. I said, you really believe that? He said, yeah. I mean, these are pretty senior people. They ought to be able to get better. I said, okay, so do you think your boss feels like that about you? Fortunately, he had a really good boss, so I could use this as an example. It just stopped him cold. He said, no, I actually think my boss really, really wants to help me. And I said to him, okay, great. How does that feel to you? Feels great. Okay. How can you help yourself get into that mindset about your folks? And then we got into, and I talk about this in all three of my books because I think it's so important, we got into his self-talk. What was his mental monologue? And the very good news is one can manage one's self-talk. He realized that his self-talk was they're grown-ups. I shouldn't have to help them. It bugs me that I have to help them. And he shifted it toward, hey, everybody needs help to get better at the stuff they don't know how to do. He literally shifted his little mental tape, and it made a huge difference. He really started coaching.
Erika, I think a lot of managers struggle with this. So define for our audience the difference between managing and coaching.
When I say managing, I mean your whole toolkit. Getting the right people hired, getting them started correctly, listening to them deeply, making clear agreements with them about what they're meant to do, giving them feedback either when they're doing it well or when they're not, delegating big areas of responsibility to them, and then coaching. And coaching is specifically about learning to do new things. And so it's pretty targeted as the way everything else is. Like I think about the people that I manage and manage lightly because they're consultants, so it's a very collaborative thing. I coach them some, but that's not my main interaction with them is not helping them improve. They're pretty great, and I do sometimes have to say, hey, here's a place where it'd be great if you grew. Let's help you grow here. So I think of the whole umbrella as managing, and it involves lots of different tools in the toolkit, and that coaching is one of the tools in that toolkit.
I was curious, you have any thoughts? Have you seen the movie Jobs? It's on Stephen Jobs?
I haven't. No, I haven't seen it yet.
Because I read your book, and I thought you see and hear how Stephen Jobs operated, and somehow he was able to pull it off, which is diametrically opposed to what you talk about in the book here.
Diametrically opposed in some ways, but it's kind of like I was talking to somebody about Steve Jobs the other day relative to the reading So People Will Follow book, and they said, well, it sounds like Steve Jobs was horrible to deal with, and I said, but really, think about it. So there are these 6 things, right? Farsighted, passionate, courageous, wise, generous, trustworthy. So he was definitely farsighted, passionate, and courageous, just off the charts. Mm-hmm. He was probably moderate on wise. He wasn't very generous except to certain people, and I don't think he was very trustworthy, sadly. But he's so over-indexed on the first 3 that it kind of carried him through in spite of his deficiencies in the others. And I've seen that sometimes. If somebody is just world-class in some of them, people will put up with the person's deficiencies because they're so amazing on part of the job of leader.
Our guest is Erika Andersen. We're talking about her book, Growing Great Employees, Turning Ordinary People into Extraordinary Performers. Erika, is there one thing about your book that I should have asked you about that we haven't discussed yet?
You have done a fantastic job of just, kind of running through the book and the core things. I think the only thing we haven't covered is, I spend the whole book really talking about what are the responsibilities and skills and mindset of a good manager. And then toward the end of the book, I say, and there's a responsibility of good employees, too. Sometimes good, skillful, well-intentioned managers kind of get held hostage to bad employees because they keep trying to be skillful with them, and it doesn't work, and they keep sort of blaming themselves. It's like, should I be doing something differently? Is it me? So I kind of lay out in one chapter, like, what good employees do. And good employees do these things for the most part. They are open to feedback. They're we're not always open, but good employees, generally speaking, when you give them feedback, they take it in, they want to hear it, they try to improve. So they're open to that. Second thing is, know that at the end of the day, they need to manage their own growth. They will love your help, they will ask for your help, but they don't expect, you to drag them kicking and screaming to the next level. They know that they are self-generating learners and improvers, and they're trying to get better. So the main impulse of getting better comes from them. That's good employees do that. Good employees keep their agreements. I know this sounds, silly, but I can't tell you how many times over the years I've seen managers really held hostage to people who just kind of don't really exactly do what they say they're going to do. Kind of they do, kind of they don't, but they never really just go, boom, I can totally rely on. And then the last thing is good employees play well with others. They're good corporate citizens. They don't make life hell for other people. They're good to be around. They support the success of everybody. And if you have an employee that you're wondering whether or not to let go of, and you kind of go down that checklist, how do they respond to feedback? Do they manage their own growth? Do they keep their agreements? Do they play well with others? And you're kind of going, no, 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 no. Well, you know what? If you've done everything that's your responsibility to do, if you've made clear agreements and given them feedback and given them a chance to improve, and they're still acting like this, you should probably let them go. So, and the reason I wrote that chapter is because I wanted to make it clear that this is, it takes two to tango. And, if you're really doing everything that's your responsibility as a good manager and the person's still dragging their heels and being a pain in the neck all the time, that's their responsibility.
Good point. So, Erika, if people want to learn more about the topic or more about what you do, where should they go?
Well, they can go to our website, the company website, proteus-international.com. They can go to my Forbes blog. If you just go to blogs at Forbes and look at my name, Erika Andersen, and I write there 2, 3, 4 times a week, and always about how to make work better, a lot about management and leadership and employees and how to succeed. I would love it. You can read any of my books. So Growing Great Employees was my first book. Then I wrote a book called Being Strategic, and the last book that I just came out last year is called Leading So People Will Follow. And I like to think that they're all helpful.
Yeah, and the podcast, Leading People Can Follow, is out on the BizTalk website, biztalkradioshow.com. Erika, thanks for being on the program.
Oh, thank you so much. You always ask such good questions. I really appreciate it, Jim.
My pleasure. This or other BizTalk podcasts may be downloaded by visiting our website, biztalkradioshow.com, or you can subscribe to BizTalk through iTunes. Follow us on Twitter at BizTalk1040 and like us on Facebook. If you want to learn the strategies finding and getting performance out of A-player salespeople, contact Performance Group by calling 800-950-9509 or visit us on the web at pmgllc.net. This has been your host, Jim Lobaito.